Hi there. What we're going to do, excuse me, in this chapter 7 and this week is we're going to be looking at percentages. Now, there's a direct relationship between percentages, fractions, and decimals. And in this first section, 7.1, you need to be able to go from a fraction to a percent, or from a decimal to a percent. And so that's what we're going to be converting in this first section. So here I have an example. All right, this is this block has been divided into 100 individual pieces. And so I want to express the shaded amount as a fraction, well, which is something we've done before. So I know that we have a total of 100 little blocks. How many are shaded? Well, you've got 10, 20, 30, 41. So the shaded area can be represented as a fraction 41 out of 100. All right. Now that cannot be reduced. So this fraction represents this amount. Now we learned in the last section or the last chapter that we can change this into a decimal. So 41 100ths is one way to show how much we have, but also 0.41. I'll put the 0 in front. That's another way of representing the shaded. So you can represent this with a fraction, and you can also represent this with a decimal. These mean the same thing. And now this chapter deals with the third way of representing this amount. This amount is 41%. All right, so that's this is what we'll be dealing with, is talking about percentages. The percent sign means out of 100. So this is actually a fraction, but it's a specific fraction in that the denominator is set. When you have a percent sign, you have divided whatever you have into 100 equal pieces every time. So this does represent a fraction, and that fraction always has a denominator of 100. A percent sign is going to be out of 100. So here we have 41 100ths. This is 41 100ths and 41%. They all mean the same thing. And so what we'll do is we'll work on going from here to here and going back and forth between these. Because when we start to solve equations that involve multiplication and division, we can't use this one here. All right, we have to change it to one of these in order to work with it in an equation. So you'll need to be able to go from here to either one of those. It depends on the equation, if you'll want to use a fraction to solve it, or if you'll want to use a decimal to solve it. All right, so that's kind of what we're going to be practicing here. Another example, if we had this amount right here, okay, and I wanted to represent this, just kind of, we'll go through a couple of examples here. The amount shaded, well, here I have 2 out of 100. All right, now that could be reduced. This fraction could be reduced, and times Pearson will want you to reduce it, and sometimes they'll say you don't need to reduce. But 2 100ths is the same as 1/50th, okay, because 2 goes into here once, 2 goes into here 50 times. So 1/50th is the same as 200ths. Now, if we're going to write this as a decimal, if you were given this right here, 1/50th, you could take your calculator and take 1 divided by 50. If you're given this, you know that the 2 is in the 100th spot, because when we're dealing with decimals, we have tenths, hundreds, the denominator is also kind of set for us when you're dealing with decimals. You've got out of tenths or hundredths or thousandths or whatever you have. And then also, when you're dealing with percentages, your denominator is set. So if you were given this on 1/50th, we'll be practicing this. How do you go from a 1/50th to a 2%? Okay, so if it's out of 100, it's easy to write it as a percentage because these two mean the same thing. A percent sign means out of 100, 2 out of 100. If you're given this, well, we'll practice that. All right. But again, 3 different ways of expressing the same amount. It's just that the percentage, everything, it has to be divided into 100 equal pieces in order for you to have that percent sign. It means out of 100. So, all right, let's look at some examples here on how to convert from one form to the next. And it just all depends on what you start with. The easiest way, to convert maybe a fraction to a percent. It just all depends on what's given. And they may even give you maybe some mixed numbers. We'll see. All right. So just the presentation of what you start with determines the method to go from one to another. Like here, if you were given 200ths, it's easy to go here. But what if you're given 1/50th? What's a method to go to here? All right, so that's what we're going to practice for section 7.1. All right, how to write things out of 100. So given this right here, I think what we'll do is we're just going to go ahead and skip to number 8. All right, we want to find decimal notation. So when they say decimal notation, let me go back to our previous example. When they want decimal notation, they want this right here. The 0.02 is what they want when they say decimal notation. They don't want this fraction and they don't want a percentage sign in the answer either. So they want this, the 200ths. Okay, the 2 is in the 100th spot. Okay. So how can you do this? We want to write this as a decimal notation. Well, I'm going to go to the fraction to show you why we're going to do what we're going to do. So what we have, this percent can be replaced by out of 100. All right, so turn that off. Sorry about that. Now, if you go back to our previous sections, I know that when you're dividing by 100, you have 2 zeros, so you're going to move the decimal to the left twice. So we always replace a percentage with a out of 100. That's a set amount. It's always out of 100. So because we're always dividing by these 2 zeros, we'll always move the decimal to the left twice to go from here to a decimal. So it would be 0.629. You always move it over to the left because you're always dividing by 100. It's always out of 100, and you always have the 2 zeros, which means you leave it to move it to the left twice. So you just go from here to here, move the decimal to the left twice, and that's your answer. So maybe this section will go fast. Okay, 400%. Out of 100, we'll move the decimal to the left twice. 1, 2, 4. So just like, I'm going to go back to our little example here. Just like this was 0.02, 200, sorry about that. So this is the same as 2%. So we're rewriting it, but it's the same amount, just using just a different notation. So this represents the 2%, which represents 2 out of 100. So when I have 400%, 4 they're exactly the same. They mean exactly the same thing. 400% is 4. Just like the 0.02 was 2%. Okay, so they mean the same thing. Okay, now 0.06%. 0.06% is not a lot. So what we need to do is we're going to move our decimal to the left twice, because we get rid of this by dividing by 100, which has the 2 zeros. So it's going to be 0, 0, 1, 2. Let me make sure I got that right. 1, 2. Yes. So when somebody says 0.06%, okay, another way of writing it is 0.0006. As that's the decimal, you move it to the left twice. As a fraction, tenths, hundreds, thousandths, 10,000ths. Okay, 6 10,000ths is 0.06%. Okay. All right, so again, you move the decimal to the left twice here, and then then it's easy to write it as a fraction, but then you could reduce it. But 6 out of 10,000 is 0.06%. All righty, so all of these represent the same amount, just like these represent the same amount. Different ways of writing the same thing. And I know you're going to get tired of me coming back to this, but I just kind of want to give you an intuitive idea of what's going on here. Just like 41 out of 100, or 0.41, that's 4 hundredths, tenths, hundredths, or 41%. This amount can be represented all of these different ways. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. So that's how you go from a percent to a decimal. That wasn't too bad. That was pretty easy. I may have to look at the homework to see if they have any fractions. Well, maybe well, if we don't have any mixed numbers here, I'll come up with some just to help you practice. Maybe we'll find some. But let's go the other direction here. Let's look at number 11. Okay. I want to go from a decimal to a percent. Well, to get rid of the percent sign, we divided, we moved it to the left. Now to put it in, we're going to move it to the right. So 95%. I moved it to the right twice. Now, if you want to go back to this, then this means out of 100, you would move it to the left. Okay. So again, to go from percent to a decimal, it's left twice. Here to here, it's to the right twice. Those mean. So if you have, this is 95 hundredths. This is 95 hundredths. That's another way of writing that. The 5 is in the hundredth spot. And then a percent sign means out of 100. So you got 95%, which is, you've got almost the whole thing. You've got 95%, 95 out of 100. You're only missing 5 little parts and you'll have all of it. This right here, again, to put a percent in, we're going to move it to the right twice. 6%. Okay, now to go back from a percent, you would move it to the left. This is also 6 hundredths. So 6 hundredths, 6%. This percent sign means out of 100, or 0.06. Number 13, we move the decimal to the right twice. So, to put that in, you're moving it to the right twice. To get rid of it, you'll move it to the left twice. Okay, so 910%. So you have more, well, we'll talk when we get to 7.2, we'll talk about the mean, what do you mean 910%, 910%, as well as what do we mean when we have 400% of something, all right? So, okay, but that's just how you convert from one to the other. It's just a matter of moving the decimal either to the right to make it a percent or to the left to get rid of the percent. All right. Now let's talk about what if I'm given a fraction and I want to go to a percent. So 11, 12, and 13, we were given a decimal. You move it to the right twice and make a percent sign. Move it to the right twice, percent. Okay. Now, what happens if you're given a fraction? Well, 14 is going to be done differently than 15 and 16. 14, it's already out of 100. So I can replace this with a percent sign. So this one is just 53%. It's 53 out of 100. But what about 15? That denominator is not 100. And so when you're given a denominator that's not 100, one way to do that is to make it a decimal first using your calculator. So I had to pause. I'd run to get my calculator. So anyways, when you want to take, you would take 7 divided by 9. When you take 7 divided by 9, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to a decimal and then move the decimal to the right twice to make it a percent. So you move it to the right twice to make it a percentage. Well, when I take 7 divided by 9, I get 0.7777. All right, it's repeating, okay? So we have a repeating decimal here. So then when we move our decimal to the right, so this 7/9 is the same as this, 0.7 repeating. Now, when I move my decimal to the right to make it a percentage, I end up with 77.7 repeating, okay, percent. Now, my math lab may accept that 0.7 repeating. I would have to look. But how do you write 0.7 repeating as a fraction? So in other words, I'm going to make this kind of a mixed number. So we're going to look at just a little hint on this, on repeating. How do you write a repeating decimal like this as a fraction? And it's kind of a neat idea, and it's not really hard at all. So we're going to digress a little bit and then come back. Let's say I have 1/9, well, 0.11111 repeating. Okay, if I have 0.111 repeating as a fraction, that's 1/9. They're going to start to see a pattern here. If I have 0.22222 repeating as a fraction, that's 2/9. If I have 0.33333 repeating, it's 3/9. But 3/9 can be reduced because 3 goes into both of those. So we don't put 3/9. We write that as 1/3 because 3 divided by 3 is 1, 9 divided by 3 is 3. So rather than the 3/9, we write 1/3. So again, you probably 0.4444 repeating is 4/9. I can write that. So you're kind of getting the picture. I'm going to do a couple more. 5, 5, 5, 5 is 5/9. Okay, now what about 0.66666? Well, that's 6/9. And you can check these on your calculator, but they're right. 6/9 can be reduced. So there's two of them that will be reduced. And this is 2/3. All right, so 0.6666 is 6/9, but 3 goes into 6 twice. 3 goes into 9 3 times. So this idea can help us with writing these, you know, like 1/9. This is 1/9 as a fraction. This is how you write it as a decimal. How do you write it as a percent? Which is kind of where we're at. We're at the 7/9. Remember, we just did 7/9. And this is kind of where we're at. We just did this one, okay, here. Okay, so what we've got is that we move the decimal over. Yeah, I guess this is, well, let me get another sheet of paper, you guys, sorry. I want a clean sheet. Okay. So 77, it's with a 7 repeating, there's a better way to write this right here. The 77 is right, so we got it as a decimal. Put this down. All right, so we took this 7 divided by 9 on our calculator, we got 0.7777. We moved it to the right twice, okay? Now we have this 70, oops. We have 77.7777% because it goes on, all right? So this, I know, can be written as 77 7/9%. So rather than writing as 0.777 or the 0.7 repeating bar, it can be written like this. So we take this part and make it a fraction. So it's just cleaner looking, the 77 7/9%. So let's look at another one of those, that idea, before we look at 16. 16 is a lot cleaner and it won't take us that long to do. It's pretty nice. Let's look at a different one instead. Let me turn this over, get a clean sheet. Let's change, well, let's change 1/3 to a percent. So I have 1/3, okay? What is that as a percentage? I'm going to make this a decimal, because then I just have to move the decimal to the right twice. So I move it to the right twice. I have to put that percent sign. As soon as you move it over twice, you have to put that percent sign there. Rather than writing 0.3, okay, I'm going to change this 0.333333 is 3/9, okay, or 1/3. 0.33333 is 1/3. So you get 33 1/3. So I write this decimal part, instead of writing it as a 0.3 repeating, 0.33333 is 1/3. Because this is 3/9. I always put it over 9, which is 1/3. Okay, so, all right, so that's kind of how you go from this to here. So if I had 0.4444444 repeating, how do I write that decimal as a percent? I'm going to move it to the right twice. I better put my percentage sign there somewhere. I just moved it over twice, added a percent sign. So this is 44.4 repeating, because this goes on, dot, dot, dot there. But 0.4 repeating, or 0.444444, is 4/9%. Okay, so when you have that single number repeating, then you can always just put it over 4/9. All right. Okay, perfect. Well, that's if you've got some repeating decimals. There's some ideas for a repeating decimal. Now let's look at number 16, which is really kind of nice. In order to change this 16, in order to change that to a decimal, or excuse me, to a percent, I'm going to change it to a decimal. 21 divided by 25 is 0.84. I'll put the 0 in this. It's a good habit. Those two mean the same amount. So if you have 21 out of 25 pieces, it's the same as 0.84 or 84 hundredths. Or you move it over twice. Well, we don't want to go 84 hundredths. We want to go to a percentage. So move it over twice, 84%. So 84 hundredths, 84%. So that one was a little bit easier than maybe 15, but I think the key is that when you have a fraction and the denominator is not 100, then you can make it a decimal and move the decimal, and then move the decimal to the right twice and make it a percentage. Okay. All right. So that's how you go from a fraction to a decimal. All right, rather quickly. Let's now look at find a fraction notation. So rather than going to a decimal here, I want to go to a fraction. A couple of ways you can do this. First off, you can just go ahead and put this over 100. So you could, I don't know why I put a 4 there. And there's other ways. Okay. And so it's kind of a ratio here. We have a fraction, but we have to do a lot of simplifying. Well, not a lot, but we have to do some simplifying. So I move the decimal over once. I have to move the decimal over once. Okay. So I just replaced this with the fraction part. And then I'm just going to reduce it kind of like we've done in previous sections before. So now you just start reducing 375 and 1,000. What goes into both of those? I would try 25. Now you could just start dividing by 5, but 375 divided by 25 is 15. So I'm dividing by 25. Then 1,000 divided by 25 is 40. So I'm reducing the fraction. So I put the percent, I got rid of the percent sign by putting it out of 100. I got rid of that decimal, moved it over once, move it over once. And now you reduce. Now again, 5 goes into both of those. 5 goes into there 3 times, 5 goes into there 8 times. So 3/8 is the same as 37.5%. Okay, now you can check that. You could take 3 divided by 8 on your calculator, and you're going to get 0.375. And to make it a percent, you move it to the right twice, 37.5%. So it works. Wow, number 18. They want that as a simplified fraction. Well, I think we can do this. Let's go ahead and go through the same process. We're going to put it over 100. So we're going to take 0.5. Ooh, I forgot the 0. That's our first step. Percent sign's gone. That's what the divide out of 100 does. Well, we can't have a decimal in that numerator, so I'm going to move that decimal to the right 4 times, which means I'm going to have to move this decimal to the right 4 times. Why are they doing this? 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4. So you're going to have 4 zeros. 4 zeros. Oh, wow. Well, good thing you have a calculator. Some of you may even have a calculator to reduce that for you, but if you don't, so again, I just moved this over 4. I had to move it to the end, and I have to move that one the same amount. Add 4 zeros. I would take 512 divided by, well, let's just divide it by 8. Yes, I decided to divide it by 8. So that leaves me with 64. Really, 1 million? 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 3. It's divided by, no. So it's divided by 8. 0, 0, 0 divided by 8 again. So I'm going to divide by 8. You know, I'm just kind of making some guesses here. That'll give you 8 over 1, 5, 6, 2, 5. 2 will not go into that because that's not an even number. 4 won't go into that. So I believe that's as far as the reducing goes. 8 divided by 1, 5, 6. I'm going to check it. It works. So I took this divided by this, and I came back with 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. Okay. All right, with that percentage. So good. Wow. That's one way of doing those is just to put it over 100 and move those. I just thought of another way too that it would also be pretty easy, is if you have, you can just go ahead, if you know your place values well, make it a decimal. So get rid of that by moving it to the left twice, get rid of the percent sign. Tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. So 512 over a million. So you can always go to a decimal, or you can put the 512 over 100 and move the decimal 4, move the decimal 4. Either way, you're going to end up with 512 over a million. So, okay. But, you know, this way will work. It's fine. It's out of 100. But let's look at number 19. Number 19. There's a couple ways you can do number 19, even though those are large numbers. So we're going to look at an example with smaller numbers on a cleaner sheet of paper, and then we'll look at a different way maybe to do this one. But if you're given a mixed number, okay, rather than a decimal, we put it over 100, or you can move it over and do your place value, okay, and change it to a fraction, either way. But what if you're given a mixed number like this? Well, one way to do that, if I had 2 1/3%. Okay, this is 2, make it an improper. 2 times 3 is 6. I have 7/3%. Well, rather than divide by 100 to get rid of that percent sign, what you can do is multiply by 1 over 100. So remember, when you're given a fraction, when you divide, you can do a copy dot flip. So rather than divide by 100, I multiply by 1 over 100. So this, I do a copy dot and I flip the 100 and get 1 over 100. So then I come up with 7. When I multiply straight across, I come up with 7 over 300 as a fraction for that, as a simplified fraction. So let's look at another one. Let's say I have 5 1/2%, and I want that as a fraction, so that maybe I can work with it in an equation. Well, here I'm going to make it a mixed number. So I get 10 11/2%, means the same thing. 5 1/2 is 11/2. And rather than divide by 100, I multiply by 1 over 100. So in some ways, it depends on how your the original is presented, the process that you can use. So if I've got these fractions, I multiply by 1 over 100. And then it can't reduce, so I multiply straight across. I get 11 over 200 as a fractional representation of this percent. But if I'm not given a mixed number, if I'm given a decimal, instead, with these, I was just dividing by 100. And then moving the decimal around. So it just all depends on how it looks. Now this one, wow. The only reason I was kind of hesitant is because if you take 84 times 11 plus 4, I mean, you're going to get a pretty big mixed number, but it could be done like that. You can take 84 times 11 plus 4. 928 over 11. So you always put it over that denominator. I rewrote it as an improper fraction, or as a fraction. And instead of dividing by 100, I'm going to multiply by 1 over 100. Instead. Well, this can be reduced, obviously, because this is even. So I could divide both of these by 2. Or maybe I can divide them both by 4. Yes. So I'm going to divide this by 4. I get 232. And if I divide this by 4, I get 25. Which looks like that's the end of my reducing before I multiply across. So this times 1, and then 11 times 25, 275. 230, I don't think there's anything that would go into both of those evenly. So that would be your answer. So again, if you're presented with this, you can put it over 100. If you're presented with this, you can make it improper and then multiply by 1 over 100 rather than divide by 100. It's a copy dot flip with that 100. And then reduce, and you'll come up with the right answer. Let me see if there was clear. Just a second. 4 divided by 1. Yeah. In a way, let's just go ahead and use this method here. okay? Make it improper and then multiply it by 1/100, because the reason I'm doing that is 4/11 is a repeating fraction or repeating decimal. And so this is a little bit harder to do like this. Sometimes you can change this fraction to a decimal and then do it like you did these here, but this is 0.36363636, and so it's a little bit harder to, to write it like that. So just make it improper. Okay, so we have done, is there any other? Okay, now we're just going to look at a table and kind of practice it. So we went from a decimal to a percent. We went from a fraction to a percent. And then we went from a percent to a fraction. In the previous page, we went from a percent to a decimal. So when you're doing percent to decimal, decimal to percent, it's just you're moving the decimal to the right and left, twice. And then if you're dealing with the fraction part, it's out of 100 or times 1/100. So just take some practice, you guys will be fine. All right, let's look at a chart here real quick, and then we'll look at 7.2. Okay, so we're dealing this in this direction. So given a fraction 1/8, on 21, they want you to change 1/8 to a decimal. Well, just take 1 divided by 8 on your calculator, and you get 0.125. And then to go here, they've done that for you. You can move your decimal to the right twice to make it a percentage. So either 12.5% or 12.5%. They made the 0.5 a fraction. Okay. So like on this one, 1/6 is 0.1666 repeating. To make this a percent, I have to copy it over, it's too small. To make 0.166 repeating into a percent, to go from here to a percentage, you move it twice. Okay, that 0.6666 is repeating percent. So either 16 and 16.6, use the bar, but we do know that 0.6666 repeating is 6/9. Or because the 6/9 can be reduced to 2/3%. So either this or this as your percentage. That would be the answer to 23. Okay. Let's see. To go from 60% or 0.06, they just move the decimal to the left twice to get to here. To find the fraction, you can either use the 6/10 or the 60/100 and reduce, either one. So for this one here, you will take either 6/10, that came from this one, or 60/100, that came from this one. Okay, so now you just reduce them. 2 goes into there, 3, 2 goes into there, 5. Check it, 3 divided by 5 is 0.6. Okay, all right. 70% and 7/10. To make it a decimal, you either move the decimal to the left twice on your percentage, 0.7, but that's messy looking, or you just write this as 0.7, 7 in the 10th spot. Either way, either move the decimal to the left or 0.7. All right. Both of those represent 70%, 7/10. And the last one, 1 out of 1 is 1. Okay, that's fraction. And you move the decimal to the right twice to make it a percent. So if you have a whole, you have 100%. You have it all. So 100% is 1. Kind of a nice thing to remember, to go from here to here. All right, so that was 7.1, and I don't think 7.2 is going to take us as long, but I do want to go ahead and get started on that and finish it right now. Using this idea. So I'm hoping that you're able to convert. And again, like I say, I think it's just going to take some practice. So now I want to look at 7.2. 7.2 is just using percentages and equations. And we will be using where we translate into an equation. Some of you may have learned to solve these. These shouldn't take us too long. You may have learned to solve these using a proportion method, but I'm not going to use the proportion method. But if it's one that you're very good at and you understand the proportion method, go ahead and use it to answer these questions. It's just that we're going to translate and solve the equation. That's the method that I'm going to teach. Again, this won't be too bad. Couple things you need to remember in the translating that we've gone through before. Is equal, of is times. So here we'll take 37 is, we're going to translate it. 14%, they don't get rid of the percent sign till the end, but I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the percent sign right now. So you can't have a percent sign when you're solving. What we're going to do is we're going to make it a decimal, just because I want to use my calculator when I solve. So I'm going to make it a decimal. So this is 14% is 0.14. I'm going to go ahead and change it to 0.14. You can leave it as 14% for a while if you want to. Of is times. I hate to use an X because we have that for a variable. So I'll just use a little dot, and I'm hoping it doesn't confuse you. And what number? We'll call it N. You can use X or whatever. So they want you to find, oh, they say do not solve. So we just translated it. That's it. 37 equals 0.14 times N. In Pearson, boy, you guys, they may want you to leave it like that, times N. So just, look and see, but I like that. Okay, let's look at number 6. 73%, 0.73 of is times 184. I better put a 0 in front of my 0.73 is what? N. Maybe I think they'll tell you the variable. Could be an A, whatever. So of is times, so 73% of 184 is what? Let's do the next one. What percent? That's what we're trying to find. So we use an N of 46 is 18. Okay, and then see, when you solve these, it's just one step. It's, it's just here, the N's already by itself. You just multiply them. To get the N by itself, you divide by 46 and then make it a percentage. All right, so let's go ahead and translate and solve. And then this is pretty much what we're doing in this 7.2. I don't think I need that sheet. Okay, what? We'll call it N is 49%. I'm moving my decimal to the left twice. Okay, to get rid of the percentage sign of 153. Now you have to look at this and don't just think you're going to be dividing when you're solving, because if you look here, the N's already by itself. There's a 1 in front. It's already by itself. So you just have to multiply those two numbers together and you're done. So we've got 0.49 times 153. 74.97. And I'm sure they'll just tell you where to round or just put all the decimals down. You're done. So got another one. 76% of is a multiplication. 212 is what? We'll call it n. The n's already by itself and there's a 1 in front of the n. It's all by itself with a 1n. That's what we want. So I just need to multiply those and I know what the n is equal to. So n is equal to 0.76 times 212. 161.12. And you're done. Let's see if we can make them harder. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see what we can do. Ooh, yeah. What percent? So I'm looking for what percent. So just keep in mind, I'll have to write my answer as a percent. What percent of 96 of its times 96 is 36? Okay, I want the n by itself. It's not. It's got the 96 over there with it. So it's n times 96, so I'll divide by 96. So n equals 36 divided by 96. They don't say what fraction. They don't say what decimal. They say what percent. So I need to change this to a percent. So I'm going to change it to a decimal first by taking 36 divided by 96. I get 0.375. And now you move it to the right twice and make it a percentage. Now, if they wanted what percent, I would have left it here and reduced it. If they asked me what decimal, I would have stopped. But since they want what percent, there you go, 37.5%. Okay, let's look at 11. 45 is what percent, that's our n, of 30. Okay, the n is not by itself like it was the first two we did. So we need to get the n by itself. So we're going to divide both sides by 30. That's what we have. That's with it on the right-hand side of the equal sign. So we'll divide by 30. Some people always think, well, it always has to be the smaller divided by the larger. No, not always, especially, here in this case. So don't assume you're going to take 30 divided by 45 because you'll get it wrong. So write the equation and solve it. Now we know that n is equal to, we have 45 over 30 because we have the n by itself now. But they don't say what fraction, so we don't have to reduce that. But to make it a percent, I want a percent. I'm going to make it a decimal first. 45 divided by 30 is 1.5. And then I make it a percent by moving it to the right twice. So 1, 2. That's how you make it into a decimal into a percentage. Move it to the right twice. Okay. So there's your answer, 150%. So we have more than what we started with. We have 50% more than what we started with. That's what 150% means. Okay, we'll look at that otherwise. Okay, now this is awesome because they give you a hint here. 23.5 is 16 2/3% of what? So when I do translate this, I've got 23.5 is, this percent can be replaced with 1/6. They mean the same thing. So rather than this, I'm going to write 1/6 of what number? So they gave you that nice hint rather than thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to get rid of that? Because this would have been 16. You could have made it what they did is they made this an improper fraction. And then they multiplied it times 1/100. And you can go back to that other section and reduced it and came to 1/6. How do you solve this? Multiply by 6/1, both sides. Or just multiply by 6, both sides. Multiply by 6, so that cancels. So 6 times 23.5, 144. So n equals 141. Did I say 144? Sorry, 141. Okay. So you're just translating and solving, translating and solving. And they didn't say what percent. I mean, there was your percentage. That was just the number that they wanted there. Okay, let's try another one. 60%. So I'm going to write it in equations. You got to get rid of that percent sign. Of what is 45? So now to get the n by itself, I'm going to divide by 0.6 or 0.6. You don't have to have that 0 on the end, but if you put it there, you'll get the right answer. This cancels. So 45 divided by 0.6, 75. So you're translating and solving, translating and solving. The hardest one is really this right here. In going from here to here, the 1/6, which they gave you, but if they had not given that to you, you could have gone back to the other section, 7.1. How do you change a mixed number to a percent? Well, you make it a fraction, an improper, times 1/100 and reduce it. Okay, let me see if there's anything else we need to talk about. That's pretty much it. We can look at maybe a couple more, and then that'll be it for this section. What percent of 78 is 39? To get the n by itself, divide by 78. 39 divided by 78 is 0.5, but they wanted a percentage. They wanted a percentage, so we'll move the decimal to the right twice. So 50% of 78 is 39. So half of 78 is 39. One more, 30%. You want to keep that 0 at the end there, you can. Move the decimal to the left twice. Of what is 63? Divide by 0.3. So you're translating, but you do have to get rid of that percent sign. So 63 divided by 0.3, 210. Okay, well, I hope that you kind of have the idea of how to do these. You know, I don't think they'll be too difficult as long as you can convert, you know, percent to decimal or a mixed number, you know, to a fraction. I don't think you have very many of those. So I think you'll be great. And just be aware that if they ask you for a percentage, that you change your answer to a percent. Otherwise, just leave it. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for these. Let me know if you need any help, and good luck. Bye-bye.